All right, so going to talk about The Last Dance, the Chicago Bulls slash Michael Jordan documentary. They're up to episode 8 now. This past Sunday, been releasing 2 at a time. If you haven't got on that, go and get on that. But I don't know. At first, I was like, I'm gonna keep reacting to it, but then I was like, I'm gonna wait to the end. But I guess I'm meeting in the middle. I don't know. I don't necessarily want to talk beat by beat about the documentary. I guess I want to just kind of talk about what I've learned, what I already knew, and stuff like that, whatever. But we'll just go back and forth. But it is interesting. The first thing that pops out to me is the level of reaction to some of this stuff. And I knew going in that being from Chicago and like being around it at the time that I knew a little more. I thought I knew a little more. But to hear some of these people, apparently a lot of people just didn't understand how things went down. And so I think it's one of those things that, especially pre-social media, when you're around something, it just kind of permeates. So Michael obviously played in Chicago and all that. And so you just kind of had that degrees of separation. So let's just say the Steve Kerr fight or anything in practice. Right now, you might be seeing that after all this time. But if you were in the city, you might have some like 3 or 4 janitors that worked there that saw it all the time. And then they had friends they told, and those friends might have been your parents or your uncle or friends of your parents. And then it just kind of spread. And then you hear it and then you tell your friends and then they're like, oh, I might have heard it from him. And that stuff kind of just spreads naturally. And so it's just some of the things about Jordan that I just felt like were common knowledge, I guess really were kind of for people that were around it. In the city or around it, as in the press and stuff like that. And so it's just been interesting, especially a lot of people. And I'm not I was born in 91. So, and I have a good long-term memory. So I do actually remember a lot from being 1 and 2 and all that. But at the same time, I see a lot of people that are like younger than me, a little younger than me, maybe slightly older than me. They're just like, man, I never knew. I always heard the things. I only saw the highlights. And I'm like, how is that possible? I mean, because even me watching it live, I could have images of it. Obviously, I didn't know basketball. I have images of watching him live. But even then, by the time I was conscious enough, there's all types of videos around it, about the Bulls, and there's all type of ESPN classic games, and it's just so much stuff. Now, my parents, bought the stuff and kept it around. So if you just weren't around sports, I get it. And maybe that stuff was just available in Chicago, so maybe it was just more a regional thing as well. But I just feel like for me, it's like I've always known Michael Jordan the way I see him in this documentary. And it's interesting to see so many people say that they didn't know this much about Jordan or they just heard the number. Now, there's a bigger lesson here, and maybe I'll get into this a little later, about the idea of, as I always say, just going off numbers or just going off what other perceptions are, actually adding context to things. And so that's kind of how myths started, though. You didn't have the ways to get information around like you do now. And so it was one of those things, if you weren't around Jordan, you didn't see Jordan. And he was a private person. But even with the technology, you just didn't see him. You saw him on TV. And they even said, basketball wasn't huge when he came out. And so you saw him on TV. And that was it. You didn't get to watch his Instagram. You didn't get to, see him post pictures. You didn't get all that stuff. You really only just saw him when he played. And so there was a mystique for anybody, any celebrity. Celebrities were much more of a mystique before than they are now. And so it became this larger than life thing. It was legends about what he did. It wasn't necessarily facts or reports. And so that adds to it. And it's just interesting to see a younger generation talk about it. And at least to me, I hope this proves to both sides, the old heads and the youngins. I hope this proves to both sides that being a witness of it in real time absolutely changes your bias. And so for people to say, oh yeah, now it is true. Like if you're older, you watch it in real time with Mike and LeBron and everybody else, but still, you were at a more impressionable age, more than likely. And then there's still, the old cats that's still around that are more of a Dr. J fan. They're more of a Magic Johnson fan and more of a Kareem fan and more of a Bill Russell fan. And it's just like understanding that when you see it, it informs your bias. So to act like it doesn't, and even people with they argue with young people. Bro, you didn't grow up with Jordan, so no, that don't mean nothing. I watched the highlights, I saw the numbers, like I'm being unbiased. Like, no, you can't be completely unbiased. Like that part is going to be ingrained in you. And so I hope both sides see it, because you got the younger generation like, I never really experienced the Jordan, outside of highlights. Like I didn't see the practice, I didn't see the interview, I didn't really understand it. And this is kind of giving me a more glimpse. And then you got the older heads that are like nostalgic and realize this hit different because I was in that moment more so than I was, I was older with LeBron or whoever. And so hopefully it adds perspective to both sides on that. So that's been cool. I think that's been one of the biggest things. The weirdest thing is seeing the sports people that are saying they didn't know. That's just interesting to me. I still, especially the journalists, quote unquote, it's just interesting to me. Especially, and maybe, visual is just stronger than anything, especially when you had guys like Mike Greenberg, who was around in Chicago. You had Skip Bayless, who was around Chicago, and they've been telling these stories forever. And then I just hear people just like, oh, I didn't know Mike did this or the Bulls did. Like, bro, they've been telling you these stories. And so maybe it just hits different to see it. But all that has been crazy. It's been good. It's a breath of fresh air for me. I won't get deep into it, but I'm not a fan of the NBA. I rarely watch the NBA now. It was maybe when LeBron won in Cleveland, that might have been the last season that I really was attentive to the season, because a lot of reasons. But the whole super team thing, the whole new wave of player, I'm not with it. I'm definitely, and again, maybe it'd be different if I grew up in the 90s, but I grew up in Cali or something. But I was in the Chicago area and I was around it, and you could not escape it. And so maybe that rubs off on me, but the thing is, I play football and I coach, so I'm the same way in that sport. I just don't like the way things are now. I like the competition, the competitors, the guys that want to be great, and I like the grind of it. Basketball is so soft now. And so for me, I checked out of the NBA. I usually pop in for the finals. That's about it. And so it's been a breath of fresh air to watch this type of basketball. Again, I've seen a lot of those, games and things. And maybe I'll put it in a link if I can find it. But there's a great Bulls Dynasty documentary that I've owned. Or actually, originally my parents had it on VHS, and I ended up finding the same one, but on Blu-ray. And so I own that. I've had that for years, and I watched it growing up. And so maybe I knew more of these things, but they also include the actual games from those playoffs. And so I've watched this stuff, and I'm just like, this is what I would consider more basketball. So it's been a breath of fresh air to see Mike just dog it, man. Just get on these people and go for it. It's refreshing to see. the talent. Like, you really had more. It wasn't just a bunch of dudes standing out there, getting out the way, and then someone dribbling to the back. Like, people had the mood. Like, the people had talent. You had a lot of up and coming stars aiming at Mike. It was good to see all that. So that's generally how I feel about it. Now let's get into some of the specifics and some of the different things. I guess we could go kind of linear, even though the story jumps back and forth. Young Michael, honestly, the documentaries I have is much more about the dynasties. And so it also talks a little bit about the younger days in before the first championship, definitely. But I don't think they went into as much detail, especially about Mike going to college, as The Last Dance does. And so seeing young Mike, there was a lot of new information for me. I didn't really know his family dynamic as well. Like, I knew that he was real close with his dad. We know a lot about that. But I didn't, you heard the story about him getting cut from the team. That was like a legend. And so other than that, I didn't really know a whole bunch. And so learning more about young Mike, and you hear the same story with Scotty. You hear the same story with Dennis Rodman and probably a bunch of other people. These growth spurts, man, they change your life because, he just said, I hit a growth spurt, came back bigger, and I was working, and, it was a different animal. And so, but other than that, that was it. Like, me watching The Last Dance, I didn't see anything that made me feel like, wow, like Jordan tapped into something, or there was, this idea that he was going to be something different. And even with North Carolina, I forgot exactly who it was, but it was kind of like a connections thing where they were like, hey, you might want to check out this dude, Michael Jordan. And so it wasn't like, and of course, it's not the same with technology back then, but it wasn't like Mike was some big buzzed about person. And so, it was just kind of like, yo, he came back, he made the team, and he went hard, and he was good. That was kind of it. But he got to North Carolina, and that's when things changed. So I don't think that anybody, the people in North Carolina were saying, like, once they saw him, they knew. But I still just don't know that I saw anything in that story that would tell you that Mike was different. You know what I mean? You could talk about a LeBron and how, big he's always been and athletic he was, or Greek freak, to the ability to move like he does with that size, or all types of different, Shaq, you got all these different things. And I guess you could even talk about Kobe to an extent. It was just like, you didn't hear like, wow, this dude's a freak of nature. And so, and I guess in many ways, that's probably why Mike became as good as he did. But anyway, once he got to North Carolina, that's when it kind of turned. Now, the thing about North Carolina, like, I knew about the game-winning shot with James Worthy. I knew about all that. The thing that I didn't know was that he was so in love with, like, being in college. And I guess that bleeds over into him being a rookie, and we saw him as a rookie. He was just a different dude. Like, the longest time I've known Mike, like, through the Bulls basketball, and again, it permeates, people that have met him at clubs or that seen him and did, these things. And then obviously he's a Q. So if you know Qs, a lot of people that have met him and stuff. I've always just known him as the Mike we know now or think about that's just on you and just like, serial killer focus. So to see him in North Carolina outside of basketball and to see him as a rookie, that's the part I never knew Mike. Hearing his mom read that letter that he sent to her from college, like, it blew my mind. I did not notice Michael Jordan. He was a sweet kid. He loved the college life, and maybe that was a little precursor to where, like, he liked being the big man on campus. But he just liked little North Carolina. Now he's from there, but he liked the North Carolina campus. He liked playing hard for the Tar Heels and all that. And like, I don't know. It was just very different. And then again, you roll into his rookie year, the traveling cocaine circus, and like Mike just like I don't know if he became a star pretty early, but again, even while becoming that star, he's just chilling at home. He his mom probably came around. He wanted to stay around family. He just chilled and worked out and played basketball. And even becoming the Mike we know today, he never lost that just playing basketball. And that was very important. But that was new to me. And it was good to see. And I think some people that have done like longer reviews have said this, and I definitely agree watching it. It's just that I wonder where the flip happened because they don't talk about it. Like especially because they keep jumping around. But, you look at that Michael and then you jump to 98. He smokes cigars every time he's not on the court. He got a cigar in his mouth. And, you hear the stories about Mike. I'm like, well, when did it change? Because he was just kind of like a church boy almost. Not say he was a church boy because he said he used to get in trouble a lot. But he was a quiet kid. And I wonder when it changed because it seems like the first few years that's how he was. So that was interesting. And then I thought another part was cool was that there was one defining game in his rookie year where him, his teammates, the front office, and writers all agreed that's when Jordan arrived, and that was against the Milwaukee Bucks because they just kept losing to them. And Mike wouldn't let them lose. And like Mike said, because it's kind of like an overturn of power, a coup or whatever. There has to be a defining moment where he takes the lead. And it's cool to look back and you could, if you had archives to that game, you can watch that game and say, this is where Michael Jordan in Chicago was born. And so that was cool. Now, everything else, again, I've always kind of knew that stuff. The Detroit Pistons, the Bad Boys, and they probably get more in depth in the documentary that I have about the dynasty, but it was rugged and it was no love lost. And I mean, yeah, everything they said I've heard before. The whole not letting Horace cry about it, Scotty having to get up and show him that they're not gonna punk us, like all that. But I think, first I'll say this because one of the big questions everybody keeps asking questions: did Michael snitch with the cocaine traveling circus? First of all, the documentary people brought up the article or the headline that somebody else wrote. So if it was being reported, that's obviously not information that Mike just gave up. That's stuff that people knew to the point where they would print that as a headline. And we knew that's how the NBA was back at the time. No, I don't think he snitched. First of all, because somebody's like, imagine having to explain that to your kid. Those kids is probably older than you. What are you talking about? You know how long ago that was? They was veterans, older veterans in the 80s. They kids is grown, bro. And so even if it wasn't, back then, even if it was yesterday, you did it. Own up to it. And so I don't think, he asked him a question, he told him. And really, again, circumstantial. No, none of those people, because I'm trying to think, did they have Cartwright yet? Because I feel like they just had Oakley. No, because they traded for Cartwright. Yeah. So none of those people really ultimately were part of the Bulls. Like, people make it seem like it was the 91 team he talked about. No, these were dudes that really, there's no allegiance to them. They were around, but, eventually they were all gone. They were a trash team. That's why Jordan was one of the top picks. And so he carried them into new heights. Those guys left, and they started a winning culture. And as a person that coaches or anyone that's ever coached or won, that's how it is. You got to clean house. You got to establish a culture and get people that buy into it. And so talking about the dudes that didn't care, whatever. I don't think that's snitching. All right, so Detroit, they talked a lot about that. I don't know. I feel like most people knew about all that, but maybe they didn't. The handshake stuff, I didn't know that was as deep as it was. I definitely knew that they walked off and then shake their hand. And honestly, I'm kind of with Isaiah Thomas. I felt like watching it, and wasn't even in real time, but I felt like watching it as an older person, not older, a younger person. I felt like, yeah, it just seemed like that's how they was back then. And I didn't even know about the Celtics doing it as well. But it's just kind of how they were. But also, it's kind of the bad boys. And yeah, maybe, yeah, I think it was a punk move. Like, I'm never going to teach a team to do that. But it is what it was. Like, I didn't know it was as deep to Jordan as it was. And they talked about the dream team and him saying that wasn't the reason and then blah, blah, blah. But it sure seemed like whenever they talked about it, Mike was pissed. And so it didn't matter if it spilled into the dream team or not. It spilled to 2020 where he's still mad about it. And so I just like, I didn't know it was that deep. But other than that, I knew it. Like, and I would say for the real younger crowd that maybe never watched games of how they used to play, at least I hope they wake up, bro. Like, the game's soft now. All this debate about Michael scoring right now in the league, if in his prime, like, bro, stop that. Do you know what they did to you back then? Literally punching dudes. Like, that was brutal. And it was John Sally. I was watching the interview. He was talking. He was like, they weren't even the worst team. He was like, they labeled them the bad boys and all that. He was like, but they weren't even the most physical team in the league at the time. He said it was other teams that really were like just dirty and going after it. And I believe that because the Pistons were winning. And so I'm sure there was teams that were just out there scrapping, not winning, and just trying to intimidate. But, yo, it was now, I don't need it to be football on the court, but, you know, all this just soft stuff, it's annoying. And so hopefully the younger crowd gets to see, like, bro, your heroes today ain't going through that. So all this, Mike never had to play a super team. First of all, that's silly. Second of all, LeBron them ain't never had to get beat up. And I mean beat up, not beat up by today's standards. So there's that. The whole Detroit thing. That was the stepping stone. I mean, you kind of look at it as like kind of the mythical hero's journey. You had that early on point where we found out Mike was different and kind of gathered his followers with the Milwaukee game. Then the next point, I mean, because Mike won MVPs, he won dunk contests, defense player, he did stuff. Not saying he didn't, but the next milestone you'll jump to in the big picture is beating Detroit and getting over that hump. Now, what I will say is they didn't get as in depth in my documentary about Michael working out. Like, they said, yeah, they lost and they came back more determined next year and it was all about beating Detroit. But it was cool to see that footage, Mike, just like, yo, we getting in the gym. I'm getting stronger. I'm not about to be bullied around and all that. I like that. And LeBron, look, all these guys have way better exercise technology right now, and I guarantee you they're smarter and better about it. But there was a point where, and I would never say LeBron was like this, but there's guys that were just so adverse to getting in the weight room, especially non-NBA guys. You look at any of these college guys and especially high school guys, they are so adverse to getting in the weight room. Oh, I'm going to be slower. I don't want that much muscle and all that. And yes, there's ways to be smart about it. But I love Mike showing that, man, let's just get to work. And so I love that. But other than that, I knew everything else. But it was cool to see Mike kind of get to work and the team to focus up. But anyway, that's the next hurdle they get over now. And then after they get over the Pistons, they just kind of start rolling. And then they kind of are now getting into the championships at the end of the series. They're going into the championships individually. But, yeah. So, I think, you know they won 6. So that is what it is. To kind of see who they beat and how they did it. Again, something that I've seen all my life. but it's cool for other people to see it. Now, some of the off the court stuff, a lot of this drama. Trying to think where to start. I feel like the earlier years, it wasn't as bad. I mean, you definitely, even against the Lakers in the first championship, you saw Mike had to learn to be a better all-around player. He was a prolific scorer, and he go hard. He could do a lot of other things as well because he went so hard. But he had to learn how to be a better teammate, really, more so than a player. And I think it's very reminiscent to some lessons that some guys haven't learned today. A lot of guys on certain teams just haven't learned how to give up the hero ball. And you saw, once again, that you could be effective. You could be pass effective. You could be elite. But until you learn that you're not bigger than the game, you can't win a championship. And so that had to play into it, and you saw that maturation by Mike to where they eventually start winning. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to say about the games. The outside stuff, bro, I couldn't imagine being Michael Jordan. I think most of us probably say that, but I could not imagine. And you know how it is, like with celebrities. But just to see it was just crazy. They be up in my man. Like, I see all these players in different sports today and all their complaints and all that, which I understand. But you got to big up Michael, especially in NBA. He pushed away for that. Because, like, I think about the way, like, everybody's, like, talking about the pressure of social media and all this stuff, and everybody asking you for money and having to be a role model and all this. Mike did that first. Not to say that there weren't celebrities before, but like they said, they weren't even airing the finals back when Mike got in the league. They were playing it after the fact. So you get around the Magic now, like, yes, stars, obviously, but not on Mike's level. Mike took it global. And then the whole Jordans, like the Air Jordans and all that, Mike took it global. And so he was a rock star on a different level. And I think any of the players would say that. And so I always felt bad for LeBron, even though I'm not a super fan. But as a person, I felt bad, kind of the scrutiny he has and the pressure that must have. But Mike did it first and paved the way for you. Like, they didn't respect it back then. They did not respect it. From the way they even got in his face was respecting his space to the questions. Now, I think they still ask stupid questions, but you couldn't really freeze nobody out like that back then. The media was much stronger than the player. They're not stronger than the player now. And so there's certain, journalists or whoever you could freeze out. And it's similar, but you could do more as a player now. Like, bro, I'm not talking to you. Or like you could trash somebody. You couldn't really do that back then. You didn't even have the outlets to do it like you do now. And so the way they talk to him, and then the owners, everything, like this whole drama goes around Jerry Krause and his involvement and how basically he wanted the credit. And so he wanted credit that was going to Michael and then secondarily to Phil Jackson. When he's like, y'all wouldn't Phil Jackson if it wasn't for me. And he didn't draft Michael, but he drafted Scotty and Horace. And he eventually got Rodman and all that stuff. But it doesn't really matter about the details. The craziest part is that this is about a GM and the biggest star ever. You don't even got to be a big star right now. You could be, I don't know. You could be, who's a good player? You could be Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving, I mean, obviously a great player, not the biggest star in the league. You could be Kyrie Irving and with a wave of your finger, get the coach fired and the GM fired. Like a wave of your finger. Could you imagine having a NBA where the GM is trying to push LeBron James out and the owner's just kind of letting this power struggle go on. It ain't happening. It's not happening. People are gone. Everyone looked at Luke Walton like, bro, you're getting fired. You know that, right? And it's just like, it's happening. LeBron ain't going. And so for Michael Jordan to talk about retirement 2 times, to talk about playing with Scotty, for even Scotty to even talk about not playing for the Bulls, to talk about trying to fight to keep Phil Jackson, one of the greatest coaches, like, it blows the mind when looking at today's NBA. Because today's NBA, you just wouldn't see it. The star gets everything they want. And here you had the biggest stars of all stars. And so Mike had to really pave some roads. He had to pave some roads for players. And LeBron, too. I've always given him credit because as much as there's ways he could do things differently, he can't take less because it's just going to hurt the next person. He's the only one in position during his prime to take more so that it becomes normal. And so in basketball, that's what you got to do. And so I've always commended him because he had to make those hard decisions. But Mike definitely paved the road to get to that point where it's just like, look how they treat Michael, bro. And so it's just crazy to think that this whole drama is over that. Now, one thing I will say, my knowledge of Krause and that's not part of my background. I was not, obviously, I was around when it happened, but not super conscious. And growing up around it, it was more about Michael and his legends and all that. It was never about Krause and the ownership. So learning about all this stuff with Krause is new to me. And what I will say is definitely Krause has a point. But Krause needs to, you got to accept what comes with winning. You have to. It's the same reason why you got teams that'll win a Super Bowl or win an NBA championship, and you got players thinking that they were bigger than they were, go get contracts or go, leave a good situation to go get more money or teams to pay them, and they don't pan out like that. It's because, obviously, maybe on some level, they're like, bro, I know I ain't that good, but I ain't gonna never have a chance to make this money. But mostly I think it's players like, yo, I did that. I am that type of player. And then they go where the love is. And you realize, like, no, it wasn't because of you. Or it wasn't just because of you. And so Mike, at least right now, because he has the benefit of talking after everybody, he says, I always believe the organization played a big part, but the players play a bigger part. Simple, political, easy. And maybe Krause was just simply the players play a part, big part, but we play a bigger part. And it could have just been a matter of disagreement. Either way, it played out in a way where Krause was just like, yo, I am not getting credit for this stuff. And I think he definitely won Executive of the Year and all that. But what you got to realize as a GM and anybody that's off screen like that is that your success is spoken through the rest of the team. Where else is it going to come from? The GMs aren't getting on the court and balling against each other. You know what I mean? They have award for Executive of the Year, but your award is winning the championship. Your award is, the accolades that come from the players and all that. It's a part that you share in. And as much as I give crap today about society with the 0 to 100, the yes or no, up or down, black and white, a lot of high level people think that way. And you see it even back then, where it's like, and honestly, I don't really think Mike like didn't respect what Krause did. I just don't think he respected it a lot, but I do think there was respect there. But I do think Krause, for some reason, felt like he could just do this with anybody. And you find out. We see it all the time in sports. We see it in the NBA today. Oh, man, the Heat, this, and that. Nah, man, well, Eric Spoelstra really did this, and Pat Riley and this and that. Yeah, LeBron left. Not happening. not happening. And Eric is not saying Eric's a bad coach. The thing is, two things could be true at once. Eric could be a good coach. He also could benefit greatly from having LeBron. LeBron could have benefited from being around Wade and Bosh. Like, all of it's true. Same thing with the Bulls. Krause could be an amazing GM. Why am I Phil Jackson? I'm like blanking. Phil could be a great coach. Mike, greatest player to play the game. All that could be true at once, and it comes together to win. Like, everybody talks about cliche of team sports, no I in team and all that. It's not. It takes everything to make the machine run. And so we can debate back and forth, bicker about which part is more important. Really, at the end of the day, I think like a machine, some parts do more work, but they're all important because without them together, it won't work. Like, you think about a car, there's parts of your car that don't work as hard or produce as much output as the engine. But without that part, it doesn't matter. Your car's not going anywhere or it's not safe to drive. So to me, I think that's just what it fell down to. And it was weird to see. And I don't even know if the disrespect meant a whole, maybe. I don't know this guy. I don't know none of them. But the disrespect was interesting to see. And it was outside of the normal team stuff. Because you talk crap to each other. You don't talk crap about, and you can talk a little crap with coaches, especially like assistants, even with the head coach. But you don't talk crap to the coaches. And you don't, obviously I have been in a professional where you have a business side of it. But I would imagine you don't just talk crap to them like they were to Jerry Krause. And everybody said he was a great guy outside of basketball. Kind of like Mike. So I don't know if that really played into it more so than he just was looking out for his own legacy. And I understand it. And if you haven't watched Draft Day, that beautiful, beautiful NFL movie, then you don't understand a GM just wanting to do it by his own, making it with his own team that he built. But anyway, so that stuff was interesting. And we'll get to the climax of it all, but at the end, I think Jerry, I don't think there's nothing wrong with Jerry saying, I want to prove I could do it. No different than Durant wanting to prove he could do it without the Warriors. No different than LeBron want to prove he could do it without the Heat. No different than anything. Like, it's his legacy. He wants to show you that it's not a fluke. And it's tough. When you win it, it's tough. Brady without Belichick, Belichick without Brady, those questions are going to happen when you're winning. And it's tough. And I don't blame him for wanting to find out. The way he went about it, though, and trying to be a power, boss, that was silly. Mike meant too much. The fact that you tried to blow it up before the last season is crazy to me. I 100,000,000% agree with Michael. And this is why I believe in what he says, is that if you want to do it, see if you can do it without me and all that, you want to blow it up, we getting too old, fine. But don't do it when we're the defending champs. Let us decide that. If we go on the court and show you that we're not there anymore, then you do it. But let us have the chance to do that. And I like that. I agree. Mike meant too much. Scotty meant too much. You just came off 2 championships. Why would you blow the team up? Like, nobody's hurt. Nobody left. Let them play. And so they were forced into a last dance. And it shouldn't have been that. You should have just let them have a last dance. Because now this is what happens when you don't play politics. Everybody talks about politics and, playing both sides. But there's a reason you do it. If you play politics to where you're like, hey, I'm going to support it 100% in front of everybody, and then you go out and fall on your face, well, now I'm just making the smart decision and moving on. I look like the good guy. If you win, I look like a genius. Continue. That's the politics he should have played. But this man is in the paper. This is Phil Jackson's last year. This is Michael can play, but he won't be playing with Phil Jackson. And all this other stuff. And it's just like, bro, that's when he went across the line. That's when he messed up. And now he made himself forever look like he looks. So there's that. The Scotty thing. Scotty, I agree with Jordan. Scotty was being selfish. And this is the one thing I don't get. Because everybody keeps saying this about Scotty. And maybe it doesn't change much, but I don't get it. Everyone keeps pulling that quote where Scotty said he's not messing up his summer. Everybody's like, he's being selfish. He's not messing up his summer. He's not having the surgery until later. He did say he's not messing up his summer. But he also said that, yeah, I was doing that to stick it to the team. He was trying to stick it to Jerry Krause now. And so and everybody leaves that part out. So he wasn't just selfish as in, yeah, I want to party. No, he was trying to send a message to the ownership. And he sent a message by waiting and then sitting out while he was healing and all that stuff. And I think very much like when Michael came back from retirement or when he was playing baseball and the Bulls lost, I think if the Bulls won, Mike, it would have been a different conversation. And the same way when Scotty was sitting out and then they were playing rough, but then they started winning with Rodman and Michael as the 1 and 2. And then Scotty came back. I think if the Bulls continued to lose, it would have been a different story. I think it would have been a different story. Because you sit there, you watch them lose, and you're like, bro, I told you you need me. But when they start winning, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I need to get in here because I'm hurting my case. Same thing when Mike was retired. Like the Bulls was winning. If they would have won championships without him, he would have been like, oh, no, I don't need to go back. Because, like, that's not good. And some people say he wouldn't win back to Chicago. And I think that's an interesting thing, like, because, yeah, it just makes it look like, bro, this team was good without you. And so I think he would have came back, but probably not to Chicago. But since they lost, it was like, okay, y'all helping my case. I'm going to go in and save y'all. So it's interesting. Things could have flipped instead of flopping. But either way, Scotty was selfish on that. Mainly because it was his fault. Like, sitting out, holding out, missing games, all that. That's part of, the struggle for power. But when you're struggling because of a contract you signed, and you only signed it because you were greedy. You only signed it because you were greedy. Like, Scotty was saying somewhere around the lines, like, I didn't have anything close to that money before then. And so, like, I need to get that money. Like, bro, play the long game. The owner told you this is a ripoff. Bro, he gave you the contract. Like, this is a ripoff. He didn't say that, but it wasn't even that it was a ripoff. It was the fact that it's so long and that you don't know what can happen. You can, the league could make more money, which Reinsdorf knew they were. And not only that, you could be a bigger value as a star, and now you're locked into this contract. He didn't listen. And so I have no regrets, or not regrets. I don't have no sympathy for Pippen. And then the way he played it out after that, he was being selfish. And then, on top of that, I actually didn't know this at all. Well, because the dynasty documentary I have is about the championship season. So I didn't know in that season when Mike was retired and they went up against the Knicks, I didn't know Scottie sat out. That gap without Jordan on the Bulls is a dark spot in my memory of that team. So I didn't know he sat out because Kukoc got the shot. That says a lot about Scottie and what he was going to do. And so, yes, he was self. And then he did the double down. He on his interview said, like, if knowing what I know now, I'd do it again. Like, bro. Like, he did the double down on sitting out. And then the whole thing with the contract, I just don't feel bad because they told you and you signed it anyway. So there's that. Yeah, I mean, I'll end it with it because I'm not going to really get into the gambling stuff. Like, that's out of my purview. Maybe I'll talk about it another time, but I'm not really going to get in depth to that because no one knows. No one knows. We just didn't have the info at the time. The last thing I'll talk about is this idea of Mike being this teammate, this tyrant. And I find it interesting to see people so shocked. I think people are shocked because they are actually seeing it. Whereas, again, you've heard these things. You should have heard these things about Mike forever. But outside of Mike, it's what everyone does. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, LeBron James himself, Kobe Bryant. Like, these type of elite killers, especially not the Shaqs, like the freaks of nature, especially the people that aren't freaks of nature. These killers, they are on their craft and they hold you to a high level of excellence. Like, I hear some people saying, now obviously I don't believe this, but you hear some people just guessing at this point that it was terrible to play for the Bulls. That's not what Mike said. That's not what really anybody said. But they said it was challenging. And here we go with that 2020 mindset. Oh, it was challenging and it was hard work, so it must have sucked. No. You think that the Warriors didn't work hard? You think that they didn't have, like, you know, big time practices? Of course. And so I don't think that just because it was hard, it was horrible. Mike was tough on you and all that, but you won games, you celebrated together. Like they said, when after Mike off the court, he cool. And so just because it was tough doesn't mean it was horrible, but he was hard on you. And so you seeing Mike do it, and it's like, oh my God. But what did LeBron tell you when he went to Cleveland? Like, he had to go show them how to win. And people that wasn't about winning, they had to go. What did LeBron do in LA? Now, LeBron didn't say this, and he denied it, but obviously the actions speak differently. But a lot of rumors were he didn't want to play with young guys. He didn't want to play with rookies or young players because they were too immature in LA. And he wanted guys that knew how to win and veterans that wanted to win because he knew the level it takes to get to it. And so whatever you want to say, they ended up gone. And so there was that. And then you got Kobe. Kobe for a minute was just like kind of cruising out there. Like, you know, RIP, you know, love Kobe and all that. But he was cruising for a minute after Shaq left. And then eventually it was like, okay, like this just being the biggest scorer is not cool. I need to get back to winning. And that's when they got Pau Gasol and they started really building a team to win. And again, like, you know, when you had Kwame Brown and like all those guys, like they had to go because Kobe knew that like they didn't have what it take to put in the work to be champions. And they had to rebuild that roster. It's not just about talent. It's about people that can take that. And so you had that. People talk about New England's not fun because they're about their business. There's that. You hear stories about Peyton Manning, tyrant. Like, y'all can say all this stuff, but it ain't just Mike. And it's funny. I'm not comparing myself to Michael Jordan, nothing like that. But it's funny because I've heard this stuff myself. coaching and being around big time programs and knowing those coaches and, people that send, half their team to D1 schools and win multiple state championships, or even Nick Saban and all that. Listening to these coaches, they'll tell you, they all hear that. It's like, bro, from the outside looking in, people just think you're like the worst. And it's like, you don't get it. We can have fun. I'm a fun type coach and dude. But there is times and place, and you have to earn that right. And so people think, oh man, we just got to throw in fun just for the sake of it. Like it's just a necessary, birthright. No, you got to earn that. You got to work up to that. And we can do those things once we are reaching a level where we know we need to be, and you show me you can sustain it. And so Mike was just pushing these guys. Are there different ways to go about it? Yes. I definitely 100% believe that, but it's going to be tough either way you do it. Like, you might not be Michael calling people a hoe and all that, but you're going to be on people. You got to be, because at the end of the day, again, this is not Madden. This is not 2K. This is not a video game. These are people with feelings. Just because they super tall, they got feelings. And so not everybody's engaged. Not everybody driven. Not everybody's motivated. Like, you got to find different ways to bring it out of people. And so it's going to be tough. And so is Mike going to have that as his legacy, part of his legacy? Yes, but I don't see it as a bad thing. I loved it about Jordan. And I wouldn't say he was open about it, because you didn't see this stuff. And if you weren't around it, you didn't hear about this stuff. But I like that at least now he's open about it, because he very much could kill this project and I don't want no one to ever see that footage. But I like that at least he's putting it out there. I don't care that it's years later. He's putting it out there to say, this was me. This was me, and this is the price it took to win. And I was willing to pay it. And if you weren't, you had to get out the way. I love that. And we need more of that, to be honest. So anyway, talked about that for a long time, and maybe I'll do another one to wrap it up when it's all said and done. But yeah, go to the comment section. Let me know what you think about The Last Dance, your kind of relationship with the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan and all that. And yeah, anything that sticks out to you. Share it around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.